Okay, thanks for your patience as we get started. I'm going to turn this over to Jeannie Marie Ellis. She is a consultant that works closely with us on our technology foundation and strategic planning. Welcome, Jeannie, and welcome everyone that's here in person as well.
Thank you. Well, we'll go ahead and we want to make certain that we honor all of your time. I know it's the end of the day, you've already had a full day, but what we're hoping is that by participating in this session, if you've applied for a grant before, or if you have not, that this will make it a little bit easier on you as you go through the process. Please feel free to ask any questions at any time if you have them. Before we get started, I just want to tell you a little bit about the Technology Foundation if you're not familiar with us. We exist primarily to distribute funds that support technology programs and anything that increases academic achievement among students in the ESC Region 12 area. And we have one funding cycle every year. We are governed by a volunteer board of community and education leaders. And we've had a lot of opportunity to impact students since we started. We've awarded over $280,000 to date to 31 school districts and 2 charter schools, and that represents over 10,000 students. So we've seen a lot of creative learning since we've started this, and we really look forward to hearing your creative ideas through the grant process. So who can apply for the grant? Anybody, individuals or teams that are employed by a school district, as I mentioned, that is served by Region 12. Those individuals need to be involved in the direct instruction of students or any related support students that serve the students in your school district. And these will be for projects that will start next school year. Okay, so I'll go over the grant funding award cycle with you as well before we end today. Any questions you may have about that, we can address at that time. So funds can be used for technology instruction, classroom materials, equipment, any activity or material that supports higher levels of student academic achievement through the use of technology. So think of it as the creative use of technology in your classroom. Not just the use of technology for the sake of using technology, but maybe an innovative way to engage students in learning through technology. The award amounts for the grants are up to $5,000 awarded to individual teachers, and then up to $10,000 awarded to campus teams or departments or district-initiated programs and projects. So if you have a project that benefits your entire district, you can get up to $10,000, and the same is true if you have a campus team. So think of it as like if one grade level wants to write a grant, or if you want to write a grant that benefits 2 schools, that counts as a team. The number of awards that we give every year depends upon the availability of funds. On average, we usually give anywhere from 6 to 8 grants a year, I believe. And it just varies. It depends on if we have individuals who apply or if we have teams. So obviously, if we have teams that apply, and those are the ones who earn the grant funds, we have fewer awards given in that year. So let's look at the timeline really quickly. Applications are due January 26th. The team will get together. This is a volunteer review team, and it is made up of members of the board and also educators in the community and sometimes business leaders. And then we will announce the awards by April the 1st. The selection process is a blind review process, and we do use a matrix for that review process. And it is an objective rubric scoring system. We do provide that for you so that you can see what we're doing when we're grading those things, or what the volunteers are using when they're grading the application. What we're going to do today is we're just really going to go through technically that process. We're going to go through each question in the grant and what they're looking for with that question. So here are the key steps. The first one is to express your idea, proving the importance of your project and the unmet need in your district. The second one is going to be your objectives, the tactics that you're going to use that support your overall project goal. This is one of the most important areas of the project for you to focus on, and we'll go over that in a little bit. The next one is going to be just kind of the framework, the timeline associated with your activities. So whatever your project is, when do you expect to do the various steps, and when do you expect to complete those? And I'll be going through those in detail momentarily. Then there will be an explanation in your grant of the evaluation. That needs to tie back to your objectives. So you want to make certain that those things are very closely aligned. Your objectives, your timeline, and your evaluation are extremely important to align with each other. And then the last thing, of course, is to identify your project costs, figure out what the expenses are associated with your project, and then submit a realistic and effective budget. So let's start with the idea. The criteria for selection on this is the degree to which your proposal is going to support your campus improvement plan and or your district improvement plan, and is specifically designed to address a specific area of need that's substantiated by data. Now, when we talk about data, we're not talking about loads of data. One of the things that you'll notice immediately about the grant application is that there is a word limit on each question. That is strategic. For one reason, we want to make certain that we don't get long applications because we have volunteers reviewing this. But secondly, we want you to get to the point we know that you have a lot of other things that you're also that also require time. So we want to be very efficient. But what you need to do is look for at least 1 or 2 compelling data points that you can include that will substantiate the need in your district. Whatever that is, and it can be something something very simple, as in scores. It could be something that you're noting from data that you already have in your district, and you have access to that data. And then the degree to which student academic performance is emphasized. So remember, this is the use of technology that results in academic achievement change. The questions that this particular criteria references are questions 1, 2, and 5, and you can see that this is a little bit over a third of the application grading process. So the first thing you need to do is agree on the problem. Start by identifying a specific need. Look around your school and other members of your team to get buy-in and to help you define that problem. If you're going to work on it as a team on a project, you need to make certain that you're clearly stating your idea and that you can share with the reader the impact that this problem is having. What is the barrier that is presented that will cause you to create a solution through this grant? Then this kind of goes back to the data comments that I made earlier. You want to investigate that concrete evidence and provide data that supports that wherever it's possible. And again, we're not talking about a lot of data points, just 1 or 2 is completely fine. And then just make sure that you connect the impact of that problem to the solution that your project then provides. So you want to complete the picture for them. Say, here's the problem, here's the proposed solution, and this is how it will make a difference. Then you want to describe what you hope to achieve. State the goal of the project. Now I'm going to give you a very simple example so that you can understand what we're talking about here. You can see that in this is a real grant that received funding. And you can see in this example, they said that they're seeking a grant to expand their Read to Success program, very specific, and they want to help 7th grade at-risk students increase their reading skills and read at grade level. The key outcomes that they identify are tied to time. This will go back to your timeline a little bit later. So by the end of the year, they want to double their reading speed. Then they also want to improve reading skills by 1 to 2 grade levels. This is really important later because their evaluation tool will point back to this. And they'll be able to create a tool that they can measure this. So it becomes very easy for them to perform their evaluation step. Then you want to make sure that whatever you're doing is realistic and achievable. And I want to just say at this point in time that we have had grants that have been awarded, and then at the end of the time of their project implementation, they didn't reach the goals that they had hoped to achieve. And that is okay. What we ask for you to do is to monitor and record what progress you have been able to make, and then just share that information back with us. As you know, you can't always predict with accuracy how your students are going to respond to a learning application, but you can target what you hope to achieve and then measure how your results fare at the end of the year. So here's the rubric. This is exactly what it looks like. I'm going to point to the green section because that is what you want to score in. You want to achieve or receive grant funding. Most of the grants score in this top tier. So you can see that they're looking for rationale that's clearly stated and that the need is consistent with their campus and district strategic plan. The last question that it benefits students and staff, it has a positive impact on the identified district needs, and that it is clearly outlined, showing the benefits to students and staff. And you can see that that's 10 to 15 points. And again, this rubric in its entirety is available to you. It should be in the application packet online. Okay, so just to close out this little section, this is your first impression of your project. You want to make it count. Write to communicate, not to impress. Just, if you're thinking about flowery language, or if you're worried about using the right words, use very simple language that very clearly communicates what it is that you want to do. Get to the point very quickly. Don't assume that the reviewers know about the proposal. Don't assume that they're even educators. We do have CEOs who come in and volunteer to review these applications. They may be a CEO of a technology company. And so you want to make certain that the reviewer can understand what it is that you're communicating if they are not in the field. So having said that, I want you to avoid using acronyms. If you use an acronym, make sure you explain it, because that will lose a reader immediately if you're using initials or other things that they may not be familiar with. Make sure that you're stating only the information that is requested, and you don't even have to write in full sentences as long as what you're communicating is clear. You can use bullet points, it's perfectly fine. You just want to make certain that your information is clear and that everything is measurable and points back to objectives, points to your timeline, which points to your evaluations, and they all tie together. The next step is your objectives, your strategy for achieving your project, and what you're going to do tactically throughout your project. So these are the objectives that support your whole project. This is basically, what are the primary goals of your project? What do you hope to achieve? The criteria for this is the degree to which student academic performance is emphasized, so very similarly to the one previously. The degree to which your proposal is clear and logical, including specific objectives. This goes back to that measurable information that we talked about earlier and your data that you want to include. This relates specifically to question 3, and you can see that this is 20 possible points. And as you may assume, your project goal is only going to be as good as your objectives. This is where a lot of great ideas go by the wayside. And we've seen reader after reader get very, very excited about reading a grant application and then have a deflated moment where they realize the idea wasn't really thought through all the way through the objective piece. Great creative idea with nothing concrete to back it up, no solid evaluation, no solid goals, no way to measure it. And so it doesn't earn funding because of that. So you want to make sure that whatever you're stating that they're SMART goals, I'm sure that all of you are very familiar with this. So this is basically just, again, it's focusing on your outcomes and not the process, the result of an activity. So think about the difference that you're making in learning when you're doing this. Identify your target audience. You saw in the example that they were specifically targeting 7th grade at-risk students. Who is it that your project is going to serve? And are these goals, these tactics that you're working on, are they realistic? Can you really get this done in 1 year? Remember, this is for 1 school year that you're hoping to achieve this. So here's a SMART objective example. 5th grade students will double their reading speed and increase their reading skills 1 to 2 levels by the end of the school year. So in this example, 5th grade students doubling their reading speed, increasing reading skills by 1 to 2 grades. You can see that it's measurable. You can see that it's going to double, and they've identified the grade levels that they hope to increase by, and it is attainable. They've given themselves a range, and then it's time bound. So again, it doesn't have to be complicated, it just has to be spelled out. The rubric here, you can see that the objectives, it's very, very plainly stated as it is in the application, and this is from 14 to 20 points. So just to wrap this up, going back to what I said earlier, make sure that you're just matter of fact in this section as well. You want to make sure you're tying your objectives back to that unmet need that you stated earlier. How is this a solution to the unmet need that you stated earlier? Making sure that you're including that target population, making sure that you've allowed plenty of time to achieve what you're hoping to achieve. And you want to make sure that you don't confuse your objectives with your method. Your method is the approach that you're taking. Your objectives are your are outcomes focused. And then how are you going to measure the change? This ties to your evaluation. And you've got to make sure you budget enough time for that. We have had some, not very many, but we have had some grants where they're halfway through and they suddenly realize that they should have possibly done a pre-test or something early on. Now they're not exactly quite sure how to measure change in their students. So you want to think about your evaluation from the very beginning. Start something that gives you a launching point from which to evaluate when you start your project. How do you know where you're going to end? You want to determine where you are so that you know when you end up how much difference there is from beginning to end. So again, it's not complicated. You just have to think about it from the beginning and plan accordingly. The next stage is implementation. This is a very technical piece, very simple piece of the project. Once you have identified the unmet need in your district and you've figured out your objectives for it, this piece almost writes itself. And this is basically just the detailed plan for implementation. I'm going to show you a chart. You can just include something very simple like this to get through this section. But again, the criteria for this is the clarity of the description of your approach, your methods, and your treatments. This applies to question number 4, and it is 10 possible points. This is where you're going to design your program. This is where you define the focus of the project, including your limits. You're going to spell out your specific steps, when you're going to do, what you're going to do when, how the project will take place, all the steps that are needed to implement your project. And you don't have to go into exhaustive detail. You just want to think about those benchmarks. What are the main steps in your project? And then clarify those through your application. And then again, describing that connection between the objectives and the method. How do your goals apply to your timeline and what you're doing? Then you want to establish that timeline. So here's an example of one, and you can see how simple it is. In this particular one, they talk about, because we're awarding these grants in early spring or April, you have time, hopefully, to submit your POs for your supplies before the end of the school year so that you can hit the ground running if fall comes. And so you can see how they have just identified this process through this little chart. Just talks about when they're going to do the different steps associated with it. You can see in this particular example that they have an initial test that happens in September to kick off the school. That gives them a baseline. It gives them a starting point from which to evaluate their progress later. And then you can see where they even identify when they're going to train their teachers. And in this particular example, they have midpoint tests along the way. Ways that they're benchmarking their progress throughout the year. Not every project will need that. Not every project may call for something like that. But this is another idea. You could do several different evaluation benchmark measurements if you want to. The rubric for this, you can just see that it's just looking for something that's instructionally sound, that's clearly identified, and that your timeline is extremely clearly stated. That it's very clear when you're going to implement the various steps and what you're going to be doing within that. Okay, again, be mindful of your reader. Remember that it's not just educators reading this. Through every step of the way, make sure you're running through that checkpoint. Okay, when I pulled together my timeline, did I use any acronyms? Did I use any language that would be confusing to a business leader that might not have an education background? Have I used simple and clear language? Am I sticking with direct statements and accurate words? So again, all of these are very similar in the approach. We're also looking for innovation. Remember, we talked about not just using technology for the sake of using technology, but how can we engage students in a creative way that makes them excited about learning? This is an opportunity to step outside the box and think about that. What would you do if there were no limits? What would you do if you could do anything in your classroom that would be fun and engaging, and maybe even crazy? And we have had some really exciting things. Last year, I think we had some virtual reality learning tools that were implemented and awarded, and they've been able to do some really fun learning with that. And so this is something that is going to give you points for innovation. We are also looking for projects that can be sustainable after the grant funds are expended. So is this something that can live on once grant funds are used up? This is a 15-point question, and it refers to questions 6 and 7 with 15 possible points for those two areas. This is really, as I just said, the project is unique and innovative. You want to ask yourself, is this new or unique teaching? Is this an innovative way to engaging my students? How is it innovative? Don't just assume that by the idea that you have that the reader is going to know, wow, that's innovative. They may not understand how that's innovative. So be sure that you explain that, and it doesn't have to be long and with a lot of words. As I said, it could be a bullet point. Just make sure that you're clearly communicating why this is different and unique. Maybe you compare it against ordinary learning, but as you work through your project ideas, make sure that you're asking yourself these questions. And then make sure that you clarify if the project will continue and what is the plan for sustaining the project. So for some of the grants that we've awarded, we've purchased supplies, and once that purchase is made, there's really nothing further that's required with regard to funding beyond that. You can just carry forward the same plan in a subsequent year if you choose to by using that equipment. Here's the rubric for that. Very simple again. Making sure that creativity is clearly stated and that you've clearly stated that it's sustainable and how it will be sustained. In some cases, we have had folks that have asked us for funding and the cost of their project exceeds the grant funding that is available. So for example, let's say that you have a project idea that costs $15,000 to implement, and the grant limit for your team is $10,000. They're going to want to know where the other $5,000 will come from. So if you have matching funds, make certain that you state that, because they will want to know that. They're going to want to make certain that your project will be able to be implemented with the funds that they're able to give you. If you are able to implement a portion of your project, you want to make certain that you communicate that as well. And here's the reason why. There are some instances where the grant committee will determine that a grant is eligible for a partial amount of funding, but perhaps not the full amount. So they will want to know if you can do this as a pilot with a smaller amount of funding. That is not always possible, but if it is, you may want to include that, and that can be information you include in your budget section at the end of it. I do believe in those instances we may have contacted the school district as well. There was a question around that, but that's just information you may want, because you don't want to miss out on partial funding if it's possible for you to do a smaller version of your project. Okay, so the evaluation is the next step. This is going to be how you're going to measure the success of your project. They're looking for sound evaluation procedures. This relates to question 8, and you can see that it's 15 possible points. Again, you want to make certain that you can clearly communicate what it is that you're going to measure and how it is that you're hoping to achieve. It ties back to your objectives for how you hope to achieve the results of your project. And so you're going to state, we're hoping to achieve, if it's by 1 grade level, you want to make certain that that measurement is clearly stated. And then how are you going to measure it? Will it be pre-test, post-test? Is there some other method by which you're going to measure that? And then when do you hope to achieve each result? So remember that there could be partial benchmark measurements, but there will definitely need to be one at the end. You can have as many as you want. And then you want to make sure you're focusing on those end results. So let's just go back to this example. In this particular example, they chose to have standardized reading tests at the start of their program and again at the end. And they were going to measure through those tests reading speed and comprehension. And then they decided to do something additionally and also test students with ADD to determine if they had increased reading attention rates as well. This was just something additional that they chose to do. But you can see this is not a complicated statement, it's just very clear. And if you go back to your objectives, many times it's just rewriting that objective into a result statement. if you've clearly written your objectives. The rubric, again, ties to question 8 this time, and they are looking for specific evaluation activities that are identified. We have been pleased with some of our evaluations. We have been disappointed in other evaluations. We cannot measure smiles. We assume that if kids get to participate in a virtual reality experience, that they're going to enjoy that. So please try to, we're glad that they enjoy that, but these are reports that come straight back to the board, and you may be wondering why there's value in it. The Technology Foundation seeks donations from partners in the community, and the more that we can communicate the impact of your project on learning, the more inspired we're going to be to continue donating. The more funds that we're able to raise for the foundation, the more grants we can give to you. So we ask for you to please follow through with those evaluations. If you are awarded a grant, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, we'll have a session specifically addressing evaluation a little bit more in detail to make sure you're set up for success. I will say that this year, we implemented that last year, and this year so far, we've had more inspiring stories, more visual demonstration of learning and academic achievement that we can then share with our funders, that they're just simple videos that teachers have been taking in their classrooms. But we want you to tie that back. It's not just about following up with the committee and the board. It's really much broader than that. And so that we can really share with our communities the importance of these learning experiences for our students and how they're making a difference in the classroom, so that hopefully they'll continue to support what we're doing. So having said that, that particular event, if you are awarded a grant, it will be on the 25th of April. It's a luncheon. We'll just briefly go through what we would like to see in the way of evaluation process from you, and what is well received by our funders, and what is it that we're looking for in that evaluation. And then that is when you will receive the official grant funding check. So when the awards are announced, that's just an announcement, but the actual check will be given then at the winter circle in April. The final thing is your budget. Again, once you have determined what it is that you want to do, you just need to figure out how much that is going to cost, and then be sure that you share that on the form that's provided for you on question, I believe it's page 9. But it details the cost. You want to make certain that you're very clear. You want to make certain that your budget is complete, itemized, and prioritized. Remember what I said earlier about partial funding? You want to make certain that you order the order of your supplies in the order in which it's essential for you to have them. So if there are some supplies that you know, at the very, very bottom that you could find another way to secure, if perhaps 100% funding wasn't awarded, make sure those are at the end. Make sure you put the most important items at the top. This is a way that the funding committee can look at that and then ascertain if partial funding is an option. They can ascertain what is possible to give you. And then make sure that you're just realistic. We ask for you to refrain from asking for things like paper clips and small things that you can get through your school district. We haven't had that happen a lot, but we have had it happen a few times. And so make sure you're sticking with those critical core supplies that you need. And then make sure that they meet the funding requirements, and those are included in your application. Again, this is 4 to 5 points. They're just looking for a thorough budget, making certain that it's complete and that they can clearly understand what it is that you're ordering and need for. Okay, so just to wrap up, a few final words of advice. Remember, follow the directions. Create a plan, not just a proposal. Draw a picture of what you're hoping to achieve in the classroom for them, so they can sort of experience that. Try to find words that will share that idea in a meaningful way. Be succinct. Write it, and then ask someone to read it. I recommend that you ask a teacher to read it first, and then ask someone who's not a teacher to read it, and make sure they can understand. And just, your next door neighbor maybe understand what it is that you're trying to achieve for your project. And then proofread it. Make sure that you are not redundant in your application. If you are tempted to copy and paste one answer into another question as the answer, please do not do this. It frustrates the review committee. Find something else that's relevant and meaningful to share with them. If you don't have anything to share under that section, then leave it blank. But I find that if you can look at you'll typically have more information than you have room to share because of the word limit. So figure out where those items fit best and divide them up among the questions. And that's usually a pretty good strategy to take. Again, we're looking for unique projects, things that can be sustained, that will give your students a special experience. And, don't be discouraged. If you've applied for this grant before, we have had a few schools who have applied 3 years in a row and then they've won a grant. The grant process, we will admit, it is very competitive. There are many grants that will separate themselves within just a few points from each other, and we wish that we could award more. Again, we're hoping that we can continue to raise more and more money to make that available. We encourage you to look for alternative ways that you can apply for other grants as well, so that if for some reason you don't get awarded this grant, that you can seek that funding through another grant source. One of the reasons that we made this application, that we designed it in the way that we did, is so that other applications may be able to easily cut and paste your grant information into another application. Because we find that these questions are very typical on other teacher grant sites. And so that's one of the reasons why we designed it that way. If you have any questions, if you have any concerns, please contact Jennifer. One last word that I will share with you. This only happened a couple of times, but it really hurts our hearts when it happens. If you can, please do not wait until the last minute to deliver your application. We have had at least one for sure that was not able to make it because of some unforeseen circumstance. And she was not able to get here by the time, I don't know if she was able to get here later, but she didn't make the deadline. And it just crushed us. But if you can be prepared, you have plenty of time to write this grant. Try not to wait till the last
Yeah, she was driving in and an emergency happened to her someone in her family, and so she had to go into that, and she was about an hour away. So she did that work but wasn't able to get the application in.
Do you want to talk about I know it's on the application, but how to receive those or how you're receiving the grants?
Sure. So there's information, I think, at the top of the application that just says what not to attach to the grants. It doesn't need to be in any fancy folders or anything like that. You want to make sure that your cover page doesn't have identifying information, and I'm trying to think if there's anything. This has to be in hand, so it can't be faxed, it can't be submitted electronically. You can have someone hand deliver it to registration or mail it, but you want to make sure you leave enough time for us to get it through the mail. The other thing I wanted to point out on the website, there's a summary there's several summaries under the resources tab, and it shares the last 3 years of grants, and it talks a little bit about what the outcomes were, and the student and staff served project title, what they learned, but then this year we added what they wish they would do differently. And so that might be really helpful as you're putting your grant together. Maybe it was a conversation they needed to have with their tech director because they had some equipment on site, but it wouldn't work well with the new equipment. Just some of those little things that don't seem like big things until they are. So
is that just on the Region 12 website?
On the Tech Foundation webpage. If you go to the homepage right now and just select that green box that says Technology Foundation, it's under the Resources tab.
And I do want to go back and just emphasize a little bit about, Jennifer mentioned not identifying the campus or your school throughout the grant. That is something that you need to be very cautious about. Try not to identify your mascot or your a specific teacher's name or anything like that. Leave it as generic as you can. So that we don't have any identifiers. For the first few years, we extended a little bit of grace, but Jen and I ended up spending hours redacting applications, and we just can't do that anymore. So that's a risk of being disqualified if they can identify who it is, because we are committed to a completely blind process so that we can make these awards as fairly as possible for everyone.
So I put the website up. Right underneath the application, you have the scoring guide that Jeannie referenced. And then further down, you have the tabs, and that is under resources, I believe, or I'm lying to you, additional documents. So there's the last 3 years, but I think that those last 2 columns are really helpful.
So you can see, how much were they awarded, and it just tells you a little bit about their project. And you can see that the comparison, some of them ended up serving more students than they thought, but if you look at one, we actually had a project that did not go well at all. But sometimes they'll serve a little bit more than they thought. Sometimes they serve exactly what they thought. So the important thing is that you target it and then you track it. And then you can state it, your evaluation, when you're circling back later if you've been awarded. But this will just give you an idea, and you can see how they were able to state their goals and their outcomes, and it's just a summary of that. But we've begun to track that because we feel like it's really helpful to future applicants, and it's also great for us to have for our donors.
Yeah, I think that's.
Does anybody have any questions? I know it's really straightforward. We've worked really hard to have what we feel is an effective grant application, but one that's not too tedious and time consuming for you. So hopefully this will be something that will not be overwhelming within the midst of everything else you have to do. So I guess if there's no questions, we can wrap up.
No questions here?
Thank y'all so much for coming.
Thank you.